Hello and welcome back, and yes, it's time for another PS5 test with a bunch of new games to test out and indeed a new SSD. Today we're looking at the Patriot Viper VP4300. It's an SSD you guys have requested for a while. Sorry it took me a while to get hold of one, but here we are. And today we're going to be bench testing 4 games, a good mix of PS4 and PS5 games. We're going to be looking at Spider-Man Miles Morales, Lego Worlds, Deathloop, and Call of Duty Warzone. And all of these games we're going to be running from this SSD. So the first thing we need to do is get a benchmark. So let's go straight in and see what the PlayStation thinks. Now, this utilizes the inner grit controller. This is an alternative to the Phison E18 that we talked about before. Now, one of the clearest differences you're about to see now. As you can see there on screen, it is listed at 6,101 megabytes per second. Now, this is the 1 TB model of this SSD, and a lot of you will already wonder how this SSD is already slightly lower than a lot of Phison SSDs. Now, a lot of this is to do with the PlayStation's own internal benchmark there, and to say that it isn't really the same as PC benchmark would be an incredible understatement. The number of these SSDs that I've tested where the PS5's own internal benchmark is incredibly different to that of the PC performance benchmark of sequential read is very, very telling. And much like our testing of the ADATA XPG Gamix S70, another inner grit controller SSD, the PlayStation's own internal benchmark does seem very, very different. And I've always wondered about how the PS5 measures these. But nevertheless, let's proceed straight into our first part of the video. We're going to be moving a bunch of games over to this SSD. And I will be moving over all 8 of the games for the next 2 videos. I'm not going to be bench testing all 8 games. The reason being that when we do a lot of these tests in these different videos, if I make them too long, and they're already going to come in at 10 to 12 minutes, I know these can get quite long. So again, we're bench testing 4 of a total 8 games today. But if we go into the settings menu there, go into the storage manager, there you can see right there, there is our Viper 1 TB drive there. And look at the console zone extended storage there. You can see we're already quite close to capacity. We've only got like 55 gigabytes remaining. So what I'm going to do is move over the games for today's video and the next video that hopefully going to be coming in the next few days. So we're going to go ahead and move them. And again, all of the games that we're going to be looking at today. So we're going to be moving over all of these games here. These are the games for the next 2 videos. We're only looking at 4 of these games today. And our next video that's hopefully going to be coming in a few days will be featuring Ghost of Tsushima, Rocket League, Last of Us 2, and Spider-Man Remastered. Again, 2 PS5 games, 2 PS4 games. But for now, we're going to move over this 485 gigabytes of data. All of that moving over to the SSD now. And we're going to talk a little bit about this SSD while it does it. So, the Viper here, the Patriot Viper, as mentioned in my original hardware review, which should have gone live, is a very impressive SSD. It includes 2 heat sinks on board. There's a slim line heat sink there that fits very well inside the PlayStation 5 system there. But there's also an easy single-use thematic plate that you can add. I wouldn't strongly recommend that one for the PS5. And in today's test, we are using the larger Viper VP4300 chunkier metal heatsink there, the kind of semi-grooved angular one there on the top. We might include this in some thermo testing later in the month when we're revisiting a number of these heatsinks to see which of the SSD brands and their own first-party heatsinks are the best, because a lot of these heatsinks are of course designed for PC utilization with lots of fans and open airflow, whereas the PS5 is a lot more of a contained environment. So I think a lot of these heatsinks, there's a little bit of doubt, at least from me, I know a number of you as well, which ones of these heatsinks are the best and most optimized for PS5. Now, in today's video, we will be looking at the following. We've got a couple of tests for Spider-Man Miles Morales. We have got one large test of Lego Worlds. We're going to be doing an open world creative complete generation. In Deathloop, we're going to be loading a save load there to see, and we're going to be looking at frames per second and kind of projection distance when we look at textures far and close. We're also in Call of Duty Warzone because it is predominantly an online play. We're using one of the offline tutorials with bots. We're trying to remove as much as, if not all, of any kind of internet or network connectivity on these tests completely to stop there being any undermining. And of course, in the next video, we will be looking at those other games, all with their own individual test. But for now, let's fast forward to the movement of this data. I know there is the consistent bottleneck that we talked about before, where we can't really measure write performance here in this window, largely because the PlayStation has its own kind of transitional bottleneck in the middle, be it compression, encryption, something like that. But for now, let's fast forward and then make our way back in to our first test with Spider-Man Miles Morales. Okay, so the transfer has completed. Let's make our way back onto the desktop, and as we can see, if we go into these games, go straight into the information, boom, bottom right, it's on the M2 SSD storage. So let's go into our first game here. This is Spider-Man Miles Morales, and it is worth highlighting when we do this that with Miles Morales here, we aren't looking at how quickly this game loads to the title screen, largely because there's a bunch of chunky developer logos. So if I go into it now, I'll show you what I mean. So we could look at that, and as we can see the game loading there in the background, we're going to have like a few bits and bobs. We're going to have that blue Sony logo there. That pops up every time we move on to a new media format there. What we are going to be looking at is how quickly the world loads. We're going to be moving into the world from the title screen, and we're going to compare it against the internal SSD. Now, do bear in mind, and it will say on screen there, that the PS5 capture was recorded using the PlayStation's own internal capture, whereas we're using a capture card here for the recording of the SSD footage. So there'll be a slight difference there in terms of resolution, and not so much the resolution of the screen, but just kind of like the color palette there. So don't be surprised in that difference. That's nothing to do with the SSD. That's all to do with the capture card versus the PlayStation's own internal recording there. But for now, let's head in and go straight into Spider-Man and see how they compare in 3, 2, 1. And just like that, we are now in the game. We're into Spider-Man Miles Morales there. And again, what we're going to do is kind of bench test this. We're going to try and get as much of this stuff on screen, have them compared side by side, try and get some good speed up there, try and push the game to try and have any kind of texture problems. Maybe if we hear the fans on the PlayStation kick up, we're approximately 70 centimeters away from the PlayStation itself. And again, as we proceed through this, I'm not seeing any drop there. We are utilizing the full kind of graphical mode on this. We're not using the kind of lower 60 frames mode. We're going for the one with the full graphics and stuff inside. And we're just sort of making our way through as much as possible. I'm going to do this maybe for another 15, maybe 20 seconds or more. And then we're going to just do a quick test to do with fast travel on here. So again, as we run up the top of this building, what we'll do is get a little understanding about, kind of get some of the visual skyline stuff there. But I think for the most part there, we can say this game is seemingly running exactly how I would like to see it. But for now, we can go ahead and maybe play with the camera. But for me personally, that seems absolutely fine. So the next thing I'm going to do is, and now we've seen that this is running fine there, let's land on the ground. What we're going to do is go ahead and fast travel to the top left of the map. And we're just going to see how quickly the game actions this fast travel here. So again, what we're going to do is compare the internal SSD versus this SSD in 3, 2, 1, go. So lovely lightning fast stuff there between the two of them. And again, I can only really see the internal SSD here. I've already done the recording in advance for the PlayStation internal SSD, but that felt pretty darn similar to me there between the two of them. I personally wouldn't have noticed the difference, and if there is a difference between them, it's going to be incredibly minor indeed. But for now, I think we can go ahead and keep moving around, but I'm seeing no slowdown in this game whatsoever. The loading was lovely and quick. I'm seeing nothing here that I would think of as concern. And I think for now, we can make our way onto our next game, which is going to be Lego World. So rather than kick out, let's just go straight in and cancel that game out there and make our way into Lego Worlds. Find it there in the game library. Again, Lego Worlds has all kinds of stuff in the build up to the game, so we're not bench testing this game from how quickly it loads on the loading screen. What we're going to be looking at here is a full-sized creative mode build. Now, for those that aren't aware, this is kind of like a cross between Minecraft and No Man's Sky in a number of ways, with a lot of silent background loading and asset management. So when you do move through this game at a certain pace, you can tell when the game is building stuff with kind of hidden loading. So what we're looking at here is going for the sandbox mode with all biomes, all the assets, all of it introduced. And what we're going to be looking at here is how it compares, of course, against the internal SSD, but any potential drops in frame rate. Yes, this is a PS4 title, but it is a PS4 title with some pretty long loading times as well. So let's move into it here. And again, if you've not played this game before, guys, cannot recommend it enough. It doesn't get anywhere near the love that I think it should, this game here. So let's carry on and make our way through. We're going to have to load the save, of course. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is quite a sluggish loading game with a lot of not very well hidden background loading, as you can already see there on screen, hence why it was picked for these tests. I tend to go for open world games wherever possible, and I think this is a great example of that. Perhaps in future videos I might cut out this whole segment, but I just wanted to include it in a couple of my videos just to give you some idea about just how much there is some background stuff here. So let's go straight into the title there. We're going to go for an offline sandbox mode. So again, this is going to be a custom sandbox. Going to create it from scratch. We're going to go for the largest possible size. We're then also going to include every single potential asset here all the way through in an effort to make sure that we've kind of filled it out with as much as possible. And then what we're going to do is load into the game and just see how it handles all of these extra assets as we go in. So it's going to create that world. Let's make our way in now in 3, 2, 1, go. So we're going to let the game load in there. There might be a tiny pop-up along the way there, but we can start making our way in. And again, we've got a little bit of loading there while it gets the assets. Then it will chuck us into the loading pattern for the game as well. So as you can see, quite a hefty loading there as the game prepares a lot of the world and the assets that we've got as it uses the random generation of the game. You can see what I meant by the comparisons with No Man's Sky, right? But we make our way into the atmosphere of the planet. We land in there. And we've landed into a desert area there. And again, because we've gone for the creative mode, we can pretty much design anything we want. So for now, first thing I'm going to do is get some kind of air travel up and running here. I think that's going to be good enough to make sure we get some distance. So let's go ahead and get that generated. Jump in and then just do a little bit of travel within the game. So again, we'll go for the outside view, I think. So for now, we'll start making our way around the area that we've generated here. Again, the game does use a little bit of mist effect, as you've almost certainly seen there on screen. But again, we're just trying to see the game isn't the fastest as well. I think a lot of that is intentional. But a lot of the assets themselves are being generated on the fly, with the whole world being generated off the back of what we've designated. So it won't be identical, but the assets will still remain the same. But for now, again, I'm not really feeling any difference there. The frame rate is still at a steady 30, something we've seen before from this game. But let's go ahead and then we'll go for the inside view, because that allows us to like pull out some of the other assets as we go through the game. Again, do recommend this game, do check it out, it's excellent. But for now, working our way through, we'll make our way onto a new area there beneath us. This is some sort of snowy kind of scape here. But for now, let's jump out and explore the world a little bit. So let's go for the inside view maybe. See if any of these textures are problematic. But I'm seeing nothing there. Right the way down to the Lego logo being displayed there exactly how we would expect it. And yeah, for me, that game is running exactly how I would like it to run. We're seeing the speed that we're used to there. We've got the AI introduced, and we're seeing the pop of the graphics in the distance. But again, Lego kind of has that in spades in this game. But for now, yeah, I think we can kind of call this more of a success. I think we'll end by going into a building. I think that's an area where you see a lot of the close-up stuff. So wherever this area is here, we'll make our way in and see if there's any texture drop. But no, we're seeing everything right the way down to the embossed logos. Generally, that's where you'll see the drop down in frame rate. PC players will know about that. But for me, still looking pretty good. And for the most part, I would say we're quite good for what we've seen here. I think now we can move on to our next game, Deathloop. Here we are on Deathloop. Again, I've skipped a lot of the intro build-up when we started the game up, largely because there is so much connecting with Bethesda.net. It is infuriating. What we're going to be going for here is straight into the single-player campaign there. And it's very early in the game. We've already done the loadout for it. And what we're going to do is run through the map as fast as we can. We're not going to be looking to do stealth. We want to force the game to have to work as hard as possible. And we're going to do it right now. So let's go in 3, 2, 1, go. So, all nice and loading up neatly there. And again, I'm not going to waste any time. We're just going to be cutting straight into the movement of things immediately as things start. So again, a couple of different pathways we can choose from here. Let's go. So again, as we push through, moving through the game. Again, lots of different activity here. Let's run as quick as we can. We've no doubt got all kinds of problems. Loads of enemies here. Let's wake them up. Get that loaded up. And again, what we're doing right now is trying to get as many of those nice close-up animations as possible. So have a look. Oh, we're being killed. We'll go back nice and quickly. So again, we're not wasting any time. We just want to move as fast as possible through the game to get it to kind of push some of those assets together. Doesn't matter if we die. We've got the opportunity to die in this game. But again, what we're trying to do is just push the system as hard as we can to get it to show itself if there are any problems. But for now, again, sorry about the proximity of the controller there to the microphone. There's very little I can do about that. But again, let's carry on, slicing and dicing all the way through. But for now, I'm seeing no drop in the frame rate at all, which is fantastic to hear. But for now, I think I'm almost going to get killed any moment now. So let's go ahead. But yeah, I think I'm quite impressed with the way this is running for now. None of the slowdown and the textures up close. I'm not seeing anything here that would make me think that this SSD is struggling. The fan of the PlayStation hasn't ramped up in any way. Everything's running exactly how I'd like to see it running on this. And I think for now, I would say we can make our way into our final game, which is, of course, Call of Duty, what's it called? Warzone. I never seem to remember the word Warzone there. I always think of World at War. Anyway, right, so let's go into the Call of Duty Warzone. Again, loads of internet-based connectivity here, so we're not going to be including the low loading time of Warzone. There's so many pop-ups, so many different elements that are introduced here that there's just no point. I'm even now reading from the SSD while it's checking which add-ons you've got, communicating with the servers. There's just not anything. We're not going to measure this here. There's too many variables. We're going to be measuring it on a Warzone map match with bots only. Removes as much of the internet-based connectivity as we can. I have tried loading this game with complete internet connectivity disconnected. You cannot run Warzone on its own without internet connectivity, which is super annoying. But for now, we're loading into the game here. And again, we're not going to bother with any of those pop-ups. What we want is to go straight into private match and practice. And we want battle royale practice. So we're going to go into it there. And we're going to start training in 3, 2, 1, go. And again, it will load us in on the plane at the intro to the map. So as we see here, we're getting it loaded up there. We've also got the mic icon there of me talking on the controller, which is super annoying. It's not what we're using for recording, by the way. But for now, We're going to load in. It will take us in on the plane at the intro there. So from here, we have to go through the opening cutscene there. But again, all of this is, with the exception of that opening intro there, this is all in-game graphics. So again, if there are any texture problems, if there are any delays of stuff in the background, this is very much where it will present itself side by side there on screen versus the PS5 internal SSD. And for now, we've got the whole start of it there, and all we got to do is jump out of this plane, and we're just going to run around, play the game as normal for a little bit, just to see if there's going to be any texture problems. But for now, everything's running. The frame rate for me seems absolutely fine. Once again, remember that the internal footage is not, the PlayStation internal 5 footage on the top left for you guys is recorded using the PlayStation's own recording software, whereas I'm using a capture card for everything else you're seeing here on screen. And again, we are up against bots, so we don't need to worry about internal kind of network or internet connectivity there. So again, let's make our way to the ground. I presumably opened that chute a ridiculous length too early there. But for now, making our way in, avoiding the gas, of course. And let's tail some of these guys here in the hope that we can get ourselves an early kill. But for now, let's go ahead and hit the ground running. Let's. Terrible start there from me there. Let's go ahead before we get ourselves killed. But for now, what we want to do is have a good look round at the textures, make sure there's no drop in frame rate, make sure there's no difficulty in keeping on top of the game's performance. Forgive the cough. Let's have a look here. We're going to get ourselves something a little bit meatier than this little pea shooter here. Hopefully he's dropped something interesting for us here before we get ourselves absolutely pwned here. Finally, something a tad more interesting. Okay, and again, I'm not seeing any drop in frame rate there. Even with the AI, which potentially could push the system a little harder. I think for now, we're still seeing, like, objectively positive performance there. I'm not seeing anything that I would be concerned with. Cannot believe I'm not killing this bot anywhere near as quickly as I did previously. But for now, yep, let's carry on. This rather embarrassing display, but for now, let's make our way around the map a little bit more. Let's not worry too much about hitting people. What we want to do is run around the map as much as possible to see if it is going to introduce any poor textures. I don't think it will. This is a game that's based around kind of light compression technique on a lot of its background resources, so I don't think we're going to have any concerns on that front here. But even moving around it, we're not seeing a drop in frame rate, which is good to hear. Everything's running as smoothly as I'd like to see. As we make our way along, we can get a larger vantage point here. Have a quick look down, and again, no problems there. It's all running fine by my eyes, at least anyway. So for now, let's go ahead and make our way out of this game, because I think we've seen everything we need to see right now. And I think I'm not seeing anything here that would make me be worried or concerned about this SSD. But for now, let's make our way out before I get my arse handed to me. And for now, make our way back onto this desktop here. Let's exit the game, move the games back over, and we'll talk a little bit about what we've seen today and some of the results. So let's move the game over. And again, do bear in mind that the movement speed of games onto the internal PS5 SSD is always going to be slower. So we're moving just these 4 games because we're testing the other 4 in the next video, and talk about the results. So the Viper there, we've not seen any increase on fan performance on the PS5, and we're using their own internal heatsink, which is inside the bay. We've kept the covers on the PlayStation 5 and the M2 plate. We've seen no drop in performance of any of those games, and if there is any difference that's going to come out in post-production when I compare these games against the internal SSD, it must be minute, if at all. All of those games for me loaded just as quick as I would have expected, and if anything, I think right now, in terms of price point and the build of this SSD, there's genuinely no reason not to go for it. And also the fact that it utilizes that Intergrid controller makes it quite a unique drive among many, and a price point that's actually quite impressive. I know it's only available in 1 and 2 TB, and a number of you would have hungered for a 4 TB drive, but still, even in provisional testing, and this is test 1 of 3, and there will be a big comparison with this drive against a number of other SSDs in its bracket in the third video, I'm quite impressed with what I've seen so far, but I'll hold my full judgment until part 3. But otherwise, stay tuned for that. Click like if you've enjoyed the video. Full review of this SSD should be linked in the description to both the video and the article on NAS Compares. And of course, as we go through all of these tests, I'll make GIFs and frame-by-frame analysis of these for a follow-up article and video coming very soon. So do subscribe or click the bell to be notified when that goes live. And otherwise, there are links to this SSD to get one for yourself and support the channel in the description below. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next test.